Ready to go? Perfect. All right, howdy everybody. Thank you for coming to this one. This is right before lunch, right? You guys hungry? There's no food here, I assure you. I would have found it. I'm John Biggs, editor-at-large at TechCrunch. They wanted me to remind you all that there's the Ask and Vote app that I have direct access to, which I believe you can ask questions of these guys, which I want you guys to do throughout the entire thing, because this is a conversation with you, these folks, myself. We're talking. This isn't a seminary. We're not a seminar. We're not going to do any presentations. We're not doing anything like that. One of the things these guys are going to convince me of is that a lot of the smart city stuff isn't snake oil that isn't doing any good. So I want to figure out who you guys are. Are you guys politicians? Are you guys mayors of small towns in Greece? How many people are like political? Like actively political. How many of you guys are like startup guys or like business people? And then what's everybody else? Like teachers? Any students? Everybody likes technology, yes? That's why we're all here? All right, good. Well, it's an excellent crowd. So these are the folks. This is Víctor Mulas. He's with the World Bank Group. Do you have money to give us?
I wish.
Do you guys have like money to give out?
Yes.
Okay. So you're part of the Innovation Acceleration Program, which is a big deal for the students specifically. Tomas Diez, he's at Fab Research Laboratory here in Barcelona. You are bringing 3D printing and all this other good stuff to cities, right?
A lot more than 3D printing.
A lot more than 3D printing. We need our microphones. We've got to grab our microphones. Christian Vilem, Danish Design Center. You want to make everything like Denmark?
Well,
there we go.
well, not really, but I do think there's something to learn from any country, and it so happens to be that Denmark has a very strong design tradition, and we would like to share that with the world.
Okay. And David Andrés Díaz, he's local here, and you have a startup with blockchain, and you actually have a little thing on the floor, right?
Yeah, actually I have it, and I'll try to do a demo during the presentation.
So we have something to look forward to. So we're going to go down the list. You guys are going to talk about yourselves specifically, what you're doing in this space, and then we're going to see what the little red thing does. You got it?
Hello? Yes.
Okay.
So hello, my name is Víctor Mulas. I work at the World Bank, and I'm leading the innovation and entrepreneurship agenda for cities at the same time as the Innovation Acceleration Program. So we work a lot in catalyzing and making startup ecosystems grow, but also in looking at how this startup ecosystem can be leveraged for the local businesses to absorb innovation and create more local growth. And also to use this for urban and social regeneration. Okay, so it's a combined approach. So when I was looking at the title of this panel in terms of disruptive technologies and transformation of cities, I wanted to bring my experience when I work around the world with city officials and the different ecosystems we work with, and thinking about two areas where I've seen more transformation and where I think cities will feel more changes. The first one is urban transportation, and you probably are seeing that. And the other one is the food industry that you have in the city, because everybody of yours eat, right? So it's an experience that we have every day. The same with urban transportation. We all commute or have to do it. In terms of urban transformation, the first one, we are seeing it already being transformed, right? Because of the use of mobile, you have more options to see at the different possibilities you have for going around the city. But more importantly, for city officials, they start getting more data. And that is important for them because they can operate better the services, but they can plan better. And that it's already happening. The tools are there. The important thing is the cost reduction it's having for them. Before that, getting data for planning was very costly based on surveys and used very old models. Right now it can be done in real time, and it's much easier for them. That is bringing something very important. That is, you can change the way you've been working to manage traffic and to be able to reduce these commuting times and this sense that we are all stuck all the time when we go in traffic, and start changing the equation that you used before, which is building more infrastructure to use the infrastructure that you have more efficiently. Now, this is a breakthrough for especially developing countries, because infrastructure is extremely costly, right? So it's very difficult to build a new metro. It's easier to reduce the roads that you have. And this is what we are seeing right now in terms of how to use basic mobile data to plan better and be able to say, okay, I want to change these lanes this way, or I can set different pricing that can be charged through the phones. That would change the use of the infrastructure. Now, the major change I think it will come to this sector is with autonomous cars, and this will probably be depending on how we use autonomous cars. It will probably be more impactful and disruptive if it is used for the public transportation or the private public transportation, like sharing cars and so on. The last thing I would say about urban transportation is it is interesting how governments are starting to use open innovation and mobility labs, as we call them, to bring startups and the knowledge of the ecosystem to try to bring new disruptive technologies. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see yours. It's kind of an example of that. And I think we can talk more about these processes with the other two speakers. So that is something we are seeing more and more, and it's interesting because I don't know what is going to be the new disruptive technology. I can talk about food later if you want, so I can pass it around.
Can you guys hear well? Can everybody hear? Yes, we're good? Way in the back even? Should it be a little louder? Should they yell? Yes? Yes? All you have to do is nod, and I got you. Yes? All right, cool. So yell into the microphone.
All right. Tomas, do you want to
go for it?
Yes, me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Hello. That's your job. Hello, my name is Tomas Diez. I'm an urbanist. I'm from Venezuela. But for the last 10 years, I've been in Barcelona. I co-founded Fab Lab Barcelona, which is a Fab Lab, part of a worldwide network of Fab Labs that we are running together with the Center for Bits and Atoms at MIT and the Fab Foundation for the last 10 years. I also started a project called the Smart Citizen. Actually, it was a critical approach to this conference as a whole. We are from Barcelona, so for the last 5 years, we have seen how the Smart City Expo has been going from corporate selling products and government selling strategies, and now going towards the citizen kind of approach, which is quite interesting. And now I'm working specifically in the Fab City project, which is basically trying to use the power of the maker movement in order to transform the kind of extractive model that we have in our cities today. No? We can have a really cool technologies all over the place. We can have LED lights or driverless cars. We can have everything we want. But if we keep consuming the resources as we have been doing it for the last 100 years, we won't have planet to live, and we don't have planet to have our cities. No? So one of the options is actually going to Mars, or the other is trying a different model for our cities. So how this could be done? Actually, this is using basically the idea of digital fabrication as the main technology that could really transform the way we produce things today. No? From having raw materials taken out from Africa, Australia, South America, shipping to China, turning to products. Products goes to cities. You use them, you trash them, they go to landfills, they contaminate your water, then you eat the salmon of your sushi out of contamination that you produced before, right? So we are trying to approach a more circular model for our cities. I like to call it a spiral, not only circular, in which products stay in, or materials stay in the cities. We can even produce meat using cellular biotechnologies, so you don't need to have cows, the forest, taking all the forest in the Amazon. You can produce energy locally, using, again, hydrogen, solar, and then all these resources are managed inside cities, and whatever goes in and out globally between cities is just data. No? So imagine that we stop shipping containers, taking materials from one place to another in the world, and basically what only is exchanged between cities is data. No? And then the main role here of what we're doing, and through the Fab Lab network, one of the things is like how we start to do this. No? This sounds really like a sci-fi, you know? But right now, there are 1,000 Fab Labs in the world. They are digital fabrication laboratories. Some of them, they are the size of this room. They have fabrication equipment, and they are democratizing the access or the means of productions for anyone. No? So basically, you did like a 3D printed prototype of your amazing project that I'm really looking forward to learn more. And then these technologies are being more and more accessible. No? If he was born 20 years ago, he wouldn't be able to do it because basically it was owned only by companies. So thanks to someone, open source, 3D printing, at least FDM 3D printing, more and more people have access to prototyping tools. This is just the type of the iceberg. So that's what we are doing. We are trying to change the world, but starting tomorrow, using the power of the people and the power of the maker movement to change how we make anything.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. That was a great segue into what I would like to talk about. And just to explain the reason why Thomas looked at me when he said shipping containers is because in Denmark we have a very large company doing that. But anyway, so my name is Christian Vilem, and I work for an organization called the Danish Design Center, which is a publicly funded, tax money funded organization that works in effect like a non-profit, but aims to help businesses use design and strategic design methods to a greater extent than that is currently the case. However, I think today I would like to start out by sort of challenging the frame for this session a little bit, because we're talking so much about disruptive technologies and how they transform cities. And I would like to challenge that by maybe zooming out a little bit and talk about something that I think is far more interesting than disruptive technologies, namely disruptive mindsets. There's so much talk about how how we can use this or that technology, whether it be blockchain or 3D printing and so on, to solve problems. But ultimately, that's very hard. And I think that really the way things work in practice is that technology doesn't shape our lives. We shape technology based on what we want in our lives. So in that sense, I think we need to talk about the human capital, and especially when we talk about cities and all the different kinds of challenges that cities are facing right now. It's pretty clear that the cities don't have all the answers. The local governments don't have all the answers, nor the resources to solve those problems. And the whole premise of talking about technology to solve problems is wrong, I will argue. So I will basically present two ideas, namely to focus on disruptive technologies, and secondly, and I'll get to that in a minute, is how to actually do that, which I will argue is through strategic design methods. Basically, if we look at these disruptive mindsets as a resource, it's something that we have right in front of us. And by we, I mean cities. And by cities, I mean everyone in this room. Because cities really is the sum of not just the public administration, but also businesses and obviously citizens and citizens' initiatives, in which I will include the Fab Lab movement, for instance. And just to use that as an example, since Thomas so elegantly presented it already, if we look at Fab Labs and makerspaces in our cities, it's basically this amazing story of innovation and hyper-innovation. Take, for instance, 3D printing, which has been around for, 50 years, 40 years at least. But it wasn't until that technology sort of were given to the Make of movement and later on the Fab Lab movement that it really accelerated. It was open sourced, and it basically sort of bubbled to the surface. And then it was taken back, by the way, but that's another story. But nevertheless, this is a resource, and not just for 3D printing. That's just one of many examples. But that sort of movement in society and these groups that have this disruptive mindset, I think that's the point of departure that we should take. And especially, some of the undercurrents of these movements. So co-creation is this thing that we hear all the time, but the maker movement is, actually doing this every single day. As we sit here, there are thousands of makerspaces out there where people co-create, and people being not only just citizens, for fun, but also businesses and others. And somehow we, that's the sort of thing we should embrace. Other than co-creation, the whole open source sort of undercurrent of the maker movement, we're just scratching the surface of what that can do, not just for creating this sort of shared commons of knowledge, but also for business. We see open source hardware sort of really accelerating and making these business models that are not based on keeping your information and your knowledge to yourself, but actually sharing it as a means to not only create a shared resource, but also make more money. That's one of the things that we're investigating heavily in the Danish Design Center, also because how does that put everyone, when everyone can design, what does that put the designer? So that just brings me to my second point, which is basically how to do that, how to harness this resource, these disruptive mindsets that we have among us already. So I will argue that what we need to do as cities is to adopt strategic design thinking, to use design methods, which basically means putting the user at the center of things. And the user can be a citizen, it could be a company, it could be pretty much any entity in society. When we develop solutions, we need to have these people sitting at the table with us right from the beginning. We need to not try to develop these solutions and then present them in some flashy manner, and then realize it doesn't work. Nobody's interested in this service or this product that we developed, or this amazing thing that's supposed to make our city great. Like so many presentations of smart cities are in fact these really posh, flashy presentations of how great this city is at doing smart city. But really, much more interesting it would be to hear about the mistakes that they've made. What kind of sort of learnings came from failing. Also knowing that cities don't have all the answers, and you need to fail. That's a characteristic of design thinking. You need to fail to move forward. So using these methods, building prototypes. You don't even necessarily need to work 2, 3, 4 years on this amazing data portal before you launch it. Build a prototype and invite these people to the table, get the input, reiterate, go back to the drawing board, do it again 10 times, and then you will have a much better product. And the people that you invite to the table will take co-ownership and help you develop. So you don't, as a city, have to carry that burden on your shoulders all by yourself. So I think Barcelona is a great example, just to speak in very concrete terms. The whole idea that at least part of the Smart City program here sort of hinges on the Fab Lab movement, and the fact that it's not taking only, at least, a point of departure in some kind of problem and say, we have a problem, what kind of new fancy technology can we use to solve that problem? Instead, the idea is to have this, I think, 40-year vision, correct me if I'm wrong, but 40-year vision, which basically has all these steps towards making the ideal city. But along the way, we're just a couple of years into that. We already have this relatively large infrastructure of Fab Labs all around the city. I went to see the Green Fab Lab out in the mountains last night, which is basically hacking away on biology. And that's an inclusive process. You basically take all these disruptive mindsets, all these groups in society, all these people, and involve them in the process, without knowing what the end product will be, what kind of city we're sort of going towards. And I think that's a beautiful example and something to follow, and also here to do on a much bigger scale. So in conclusion, I just want to say, we constantly talk about building or developing cities, and that's not how we should approach it. We need to design cities. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm David Andrés, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Charge. And I will try to show you how a startup like the one I co-founded a year ago alongside 2 other teenagers, how a startup like Charge can use disruptive technologies to improve our cities, and how can a startup like Charge convert our cities into real smart cities. So we co-founded the startup a year ago when we realized that the lack of charging stations for electric cars was a real problem in our cities. Because now the electric car users, they have two ways of charging their electric car. First of all, they can charge their electric car at a public charging station or at a private charging station they have at their house. So first of all, the public charging stations, they have lots of problems. Like, for example, many of them are broken. So if you're an electric car user, you don't know it's broken until you arrive there. And also, you don't know if it's free to use. So until you arrive there with your electric car, you don't know if there's anyone using it or you can use it. So by knowing that, we ask ourselves the next question. How can we use disruptive technologies to improve this electric car charging stations problem? And how can we use these disruptive technologies to go one step further onto smart cities? So then we created Charge, which is a platform that connects people with charging stations at their houses with electric car drivers. So that if you're an electric car driver, you use our app and you book the charging station of the provider, of the people at their house, you go to their house and they win money for that. But we do not only have an app, we also have this product here, which is called Charger. This product is an IoT product. So what it does is that it is connected to the internet. So when the user arrives to a charging station, this product recognizes the user and knows that he's the user who has booked the charging station, so he's ready to charge his electric car. So you ask the question, what has to do that with smart cities? Well, we can also implement these chargers, these electric car IoT chargers, onto public charging stations. So if we install this charger onto public charging stations, these charging stations become smart charging stations. So they are connected to the internet. If they are broken, the internet knows they are broken, so they can send a message to someone to repair it, or you can know, as it is connected to the internet, if it's free to use or not. So we are using IoT technology with this charger, but we're also using blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is a technology that is changing all the sectors. It's changing mobility, it's changing food, it's changing governments. Because, for example, a government can now, using blockchain, ask questions to the citizens about certain subjects, so it can change everything. And it is also changing payments. There are lots of banks which are using blockchain to improve their payments and to make them safer and faster. And we are using blockchain for the payments at Charge. So, as I've told you before, when the user charges his electric car at the charging station of the provider, the user pays money to the provider. But we are not doing it with normal currency, not with euros, not with dollars. We're doing it because of a legal problem concerning that. We're doing it with our own coins, which are called Charge coins. And those are coins that work with the blockchain technology. They use the technology of Bitcoin. I think you may all know Bitcoin, which is the blockchain coin. So we are using the Bitcoin technology without actually being a Bitcoin, because the Charge coin can only be used at Charge. So that's basically what we do. We are planning to launch our charger at some cities around Spain or even at the United States. So to convert these public charging stations onto smart charging stations and to start going one step further onto becoming our cities smart cities. So that's basically it. Thank you.
And David, how old are you?
I'm 16.
When I was 16, I was reading Stephen King books and eating a lot of ice cream, so congratulations. All right. So let's go through. We gotta convert me into a believer. So I went to a Smart Cities conference in a country that will remain nameless. It starts with CH and ends, and it rhymes with Spina. And I went to this place, and they took me to a smart cities, like a smart city hall, and they had a certain company that started with Z set it all up, and it was very beautiful. and they had like this big room. It looked like this kind of room, and there were a bunch of people sitting in front of these huge screen. It was a giant screen, and on the screen were like 4 different other screens. There was like a pie graph on one, and there was like some camera readouts on another. And I was looking around, and I noticed that everybody had computers in front of them. Everybody had a screen, and everybody had a mouse, but nobody had a keyboard. So they literally had set up a demo station that was as big as like a Jason Bourne headquarters looking thing, where you can find the spy wherever he is in the city, but it was all fake. So how do we separate the ridiculous technology, the example, the window dressing, the Potemkin village technology from the real technology? What is the real technology that's going to be able to change cities? Because what do cities care about? Cities care about that it doesn't smell like urine all the time. They care about that there's enough food sometimes, that the buses don't break down. That's what a city cares about. So how can we inject technology? And I'm a techno-utopianist. I love technology. How can we inject technology into a city properly at this point and move forward from there? Go for it.
So I think you're bringing a very good point here, and that's something we at the bank face all the time when we work with developing countries. And every time you go to a city, the first thing they tell you is, I want a control center, one like the one you mentioned.
And it didn't work. It was not, none of the computers worked. It was ridiculous.
And they all tell me the one in Sao Paulo, and it's Rio de Janeiro, right? And it's amazing, that control center. Well, that control center was donated by a company. Yeah. So it's not something you can have out of your pocket. Many of the cities cannot have. So how do you inject that technology? Well, you have to find what is the technology that is useful. And I'll give you an example of something working in Chile. We're working in a city of around 1.5 million inhabitants. And this is another example from transport, but basically they were having problems looking at the transport planning. And one of the problems they have is they only have like 12 CCTVs for a city of 1.5 million inhabitants. Very few data sources to know where the traffic jams were happening and incidences were happening. So they weren't able to control that city. So it was as easy as us just doing a very easy mobile app where citizens could use Waze or any Twitter to get feeding of where the traffic jams were happening. Typical citizen reporting app, but it was feeding to their control center. Suddenly, it changed their life. They could access to a very cheap technology to do exactly that from their laptops. They didn't need to build something big. The city official understood it right away, and it changed her mind because suddenly he could have access to the data he didn't have to make his job easier and make it well. And these city officials want to do their job. Now, there is a point I want to touch base because how the conversation is going. And I agree with the bottom-up approach and the co-creation, but it cannot be all that. A city cannot be run completely bottom-up approach. There are things that you have to do to support the city officials in doing their job. One of the things is planning or managing like big systems, transportation, water, electricity. You need to help them with the technology. The point is, can we find technology that is cheap and useful, not useless, and not a technology that locks you into a platform that you cannot afford any maintenance or update. And I will go that way.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because the control room of Rio de Janeiro won the Smart City Expo Best Project in 2013. You know that? It was like a really awarded, and it was where everyone was looking at what's the future of the city, like a kind of Big Brother kind of all deployment. And I think that, probably since electricity, I think probably internet has been the thing, the technology has changed the most cities somehow. And then after that, there had been a lot of, I would say, initiatives that have changed transportation, logistics, and everything that we know, but it's also is hidden somehow. No? The way that, for instance, logistics have changed thanks to the internet is something that we haven't seen, but we actually suffer that consequence positively or negative. No? So in a way, I think that there won't be like a one single technology for all, and I think that I want to connect also what Christian said, and I think I will rephrase it because I think he was referring mostly like about experimentation. No, when you talk about failure, when you talk about bottom-up processes also involving top-down, which is something like it's not new. For 100 years, many people have been trying to see how this thing can work, in which power doesn't overtake and make silly decisions and stupid decisions, like put in a control room, or people just like the failures of participation. That's the other thing, participation. But yeah, really, someone to show me that when participation has been working. So I think that experimentation, basically, I think is key in order to see what's the technology that's going to work, not in a city, because I think that it's probably impossible to think about a city as a whole. When you start to see how we start to interface with our city, for instance, how we use a mobile phone to take decisions, basically we are having as many cities as people here. So each person is a city somehow. So in order to choose and to create the technologies that we need, when something like David is doing comes out and with an emergent process, then we'll see how many people will use it. But it needs to happen. And it happens because there is opportunity for experimentation. And then hopefully some city officials will help them to experiment and see if it could happen, right? And it's not coming from a decision from city officials. Before we were talking about like how we can convince cities to do stuff in a more intelligent way. I don't want to convince cities. I want a city, and I don't want to go and try to talk to the city official as if it would be important. No, they're working for us. And I think that's something that probably, other technologies that can offer a different governance model, probably like the blockchain, are at least opening or as an opportunity.
So, hold on 1 second. So is technology thrust upon the city, or does the city control what sort of technology it allows? Is it a permeable membrane, semi-permeable? Is it a gatekeeper? What do you think in terms of that?
I think that you don't control what people plug into their walls. No, like you can it's as that. I mean, I think there should be a minimum. Because the things that we're starting to see that how technology is starting to touch with other things that go out of technology. Ethics, security. What happens when you give everyone a 3D printer and they print a gun? It's like, okay, but we make guns with the same technology that we make bikes and the chairs that you are sitting, no? So what happens when this is in the hands of many people? How we're going to develop like security, control, what is being done with these potential technologies that everyone can create their own technology. But imagine when we get into the biosphere, it's even worse. You can actually start, a massive massacre just by deploying some kind of virus. And then very soon, a lot of people will have access to that. And it's already having access to that. So I don't know. I really don't know how it's going to work, but at least it's interesting.
All right.
So, well, off of that, I want to come and just say, well, there's really no way of enforcing any kind of ban on any kind of technology. So ultimately, that would be a lost cause. So, but just to respond to the first initial question, I also agree with Thomas that there's not one specific technology that will make all our cities smart. I think we're pretty much all aware of that. But I just want to come back to the idea that cities need not be concerned with that. What cities need to do is to sort of facilitate the meeting of all the stakeholders. And I totally understand why any sort of public servant would, try to refrain from having all these people come together and join in on the city development process, because it becomes really messy. But ultimately, rather than try to sort of avoid that complexity, you need to embrace it. And that's also why I talk about, embracing failure. And just to be clear, I obviously didn't want, city officials to sort of just let go of things and let people do it. I mean, it needs to be a sort of a multi-stakeholder activity, which is of course facilitated and driven by the city, but it's just a matter of not controlling it too much, not as much as it's happening in many places now. So again, I just want to sort of accentuate that we need to sort of pave the way for people. And obviously, there are also some things that cities can do in terms of embracing technologies. For instance, open all the data, not just the easy data, which is lying somewhere on a server, but the really the sexy data, the data that are sort of the real meat on the bone. because ultimately, like live crime statistics, or something that will help people also imagine, as compared to what the city is now, imagine what kind of city you really want, and for that, data is a resource. And if you have a lot of data out there, then brilliant young people like David will be able to do their thing to a much greater extent, and then that will again take the burden off the shoulders of the city officials and the city government and the mayor. So open all the data, adopt a open by default mentality across the whole administration. Like make all the documents, all the output open, like license it open so that it can be legally used for commercial purposes. So, create an open source city. I mean, ultimately, that's also what the Fab City project is about, and we're also very supportive of that and involved in that, and hopefully we will be able to scale that far beyond the sort of inner circle of the Fab Lab community. But in any case, I mean, if you sort of set the stage, mindset-wise, technological with open data, and help people, stakeholders come together, then I think all these technologies and the next ones to come, the ones that are beyond the horizon right now, then they will be useful tools for the city automatically. And if you're willing to have sort of make errors and have failures along the way, then to a large extent you can sit back and enjoy the show.
So we have some pretty big panel, and so I want to add a couple questions while we do this. So imagine I'm a technologist right now. I'm building something. Do I get city buy-in before I build it? Do I just build it and see what happens? Say I want to create a robot that's going to clean up the streets. It walks around, drives around, cleans up streets and stuff. Or we have a charging station over here that does things. Should the mayor be apprised of this? What's the best way to go about building a product, a technological product like that, that could feasibly change the city, could possibly fail, is designed to improve the city as opposed to for monetary gain? Who should you talk to? What's the buy-in? What needs to happen for that kind of thing?
How you did it?
You want to go for it, Dave?
I think it's pretty complicated. In our case, we go to a mayor or a city council, and they want always to have done a demo at another city before to accept us. and okay, if they want us all the cities to do a demo before, what will be the first one? So it's complicated. I want to add a couple of things about what you said before with safety regarding technology, because technology maybe it is created for a good use, but can have also a bad use. And a real example of that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created to be a safer and faster way of payment, but Bitcoin is used at the deep web to buy arms. So it kind of is complicated.
But there are public budgets of the United States buying arms as well.
Yeah, sure. But we have to but we have to be sure if we create a technology, the bad way this technology can be also used. So I think the government has to kind of be patient with that. Can I do a demo of the charger? It's not really related to the topic, but can I show the...
Yeah, then he can go to talk to the mayor.
Yeah, is the mayor here? Wait, is there a mayor of a small town here?
Really?
No?
I wanted to do a demo before.
Exactly, there is a mayor.
There are no mayors.
Is there any
Is there a
mayor?
mayor?
No?
Well, pretend that
Yeah, there's a mayor there.
So you're being demonstrated to. Now he can
A
go talk
deputy
to
mayor?
Barcelona.
Yeah?
Just you're going to sign a piece of paper later that he can go and talk to Barcelona.
Let's see if it works, because
All right, let's do
it works with internet, and I have a MiFi connected there, and it wasn't working before. Let's see if it works now.
So you're
it will work.
You're moving a little NFC chip over to it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody. Oh, there. Wow.
That's the charger. You connect here, you plug here, and this is the charging, and everything's working. Yeah, just that. Sorry, I wanted to do the demo before, but it wasn't working, so
Okay.
it now is. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So that's actually really, really funny. So you can't talk to the Barcelona mayor until you've talked to another mayor, and you can't talk to that mayor until you've talked to another mayor. So you basically just have to find the dumbest mayor, and then you can work your way back up. Is that what's your strategy there? What are you going to do?
Well, hopefully, what we've reached an agreement with city council, because we did it with this ring, this sharing economy ring, and they won a contest of entrepreneurship at this city council. So we are going to install chargers at this council without having to before talk to another council. So we've done it like that. It's complicated, but I think we'll do it.
So you should do like hackathons. You should do things
Yeah.
locally.
Acceleration programs,
Okay.
everything before going to a...
Yeah. So you want to talk? Go for it.
Yeah, so there are different methods that cities are using for that. But yeah, the process is not simple for startups, particularly technologies. They will ask you to be for a year in operations. They will ask you for a lot of things. So that was a challenge many of the cities that wanted to bring these innovative approaches and understand that they are not good at innovative, that the startups are, to bring them into city challenges. So many of them started doing open innovation, and that's what we have been talking about. We have been working with cities to do that, but I want to bring 2 examples of processes that do this more in an established way. One is here in Barcelona with the Barcelona Challenge. So it's an actual challenge open for startups to say like, okay, we have all these municipal problems. We want to procure solutions. This is the first time that is done. Usually procurement processes are, I want something, if you want a table, I want something that has the measurements of a table and can be a table, right? Instead of that, you're saying like, I want something to make a meeting happen. And that can be a table or not. So Barcelona Challenge is very interesting in that. The other one is San Francisco Startup Challenge, which you can apply, by the way. And that's basically doing the same plus an acceleration that goes after that. Now, San Francisco's Startup Challenge is interesting because they are doing it with 6 municipalities, and now they want to expand in the US. So basically, you enter there, and then they will do the promotion for you if they don't buy you, right? Similar to Barcelona too. So you have these kind of processes that are out there, and you can find them. Granted, it's a small number of municipalities, but it's working. And then the hackathons and the competitions that are starting working. Now, for that to happen, it has to source real problems for cities. And it has to have the city officials convinced that then they want to apply it. Otherwise, it's just a face-off. It's a waste of time for everybody. And it doesn't pay off. One thing that is interesting is you are talking about if I design a technology for the city. What about those technologies that are designed just to solve problems without being the city your client? Mm-hmm. Which I think those are the ones that are more sustainable. And those are the ones that are disrupting more cities. And business models, right? Nobody asks Uber who's going to be your client. They just start appearing. And just a little point about that. When you face as a city technology, one thing is what you can use to solve problems. The other thing is how technology is disrupting the social tissue of your city. Because there is also a displacement that is happening and that is affecting society. How cities are reacting to that or how they can leverage the good part of them. So it's not only to use it to solve problems, but also how do you manage the social impact that's happening, the positive and the negative. And I'm talking now about jobs, not about the dual use of technology, right? And making a living. What are we going to do with drivers when automatic cars come, for instance? Mm-hmm. And those are questions that, as a city, you need to address because suddenly you have more unemployment or more social tensions than you had before. And that is difficult to do in a participatory manner, right? So you have to try to approach it in a different way. And I don't have a solution exactly for that, but that's something that cities are struggling with.
Okay. I have one. First, though, I want to ask David if you have a ring to rule them all. Okay, well, just kidding. So I think we're running short on time. I just want to say, I think one really easy solution in between cities is to learn from each other. I mean, I highlighted the Barcelona case before. That's something that could be applied elsewhere, which is opening up a little bit for the bureaucratic sort of measures by which innovation is made. In Finland, they have made access to Wi-Fi a human right. That's something others could learn from. They're also assigning a design officer on sort of deputy officer mayor for design. And so on. So I think we don't see a lot of sharing of successes between cities for some reason. And I think that would be part of the solutions. And when some kind of sort of lessening of bureaucracy happens one place, then other cities could pick that up, especially if the mentality was more open source in the administrations.
So I think that the response to that is like, now cities are being run like almost like companies, like businesses, no? So and that's, again, I want to be critical and also like celebrating that we are having this conversation in this space. Is that 5 years ago, this was like a secretive kind of inner business meeting in which everyone was competing and trying to say who was the first smart city of the world, no? And then which is a smarter city in the world. And actually, a lot of the cities are really, at the end, very stupid because it's like this centralized model in which you don't have any citizen involvement. It's something that really collapsed and really failed, and now it's kind of relaunching. No? So that's super interesting. And I think that, and I want to come back at the economical model. It's like we are almost out of everything is like a monetized, and we are running our lives as businesses. We're running governments as businesses. Everything is totally profit oriented. That's the only kind of goal of everything we do, including cities. And that means I think that again, and the exception with some young and kind of really progressive governments, in general, these cities are run like if they have an IP and they have like a factory, and this responds like a 200-year-old like industrial revolution model. Whether you start to see like this kind of learning from each other, this collaboration, the power of how Linux can beat Microsoft or can beat Apple is like showing you a different way. So I'm really looking forward to see how new governance models can be spread, and I think that's going to be critical for having, I would say, like a real democracy somehow. No?
Maybe have the MCU for mayors. The MCU is the internal sort of connection between all the Fab Labs, where you can ask questions across Fab Labs. Maybe have that for mayors.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so everybody can connect.
We actually were doing that with an event for Smart City Expo where we started 2 years ago talking about bottom-up approach, and that was the World Bank bringing as a side all that. So I think, and we're talking just about that, yeah? and Tomas was part of it since the beginning, and I think what was interesting is how little by little cities has embraced that, and now the model you are proposing is becoming upfront, and this panel is happening here instead of a side event, right? So I think that's already happening, and cities are learning from each other and want to learn more and more. I think the mentality is changing and will change even more. And especially you are seeing that with different forums. If you go to Latin America, you will see this conference all around. I mean, I just happen to meet Tomas every other conference. But you are seeing more and more interest, but not only mayors, it's city officials themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the hope that you have. And that this conversation is mixing this kind of different people, a startup owner, a designer, Fab Lab, and a boring World Bank official, right? So that's the interesting part that is starting to happen.
Okay, so we have about like 8 minutes left. Oh gosh. All right, so I want to go down real quick, just starting from David all the way down. What does a city like Barcelona look like in 20 years? In 20 years, I want to be 97. You're going to be approximately 26. What does a city like Barcelona look like in 20 years?
That's a difficult question, I think. I think Barcelona in 20 years will be, for example, with autonomous cars, self-driving cars. Barcelona will be completely electric. I hope with chargers instead of charging stations, but with electric cars. Everything will be controlled by technology. Democracy will be easily by using blockchain. So like citizens will be allowed to vote in several questions regarding the city, I don't know, more often than now. And yeah, I think technology is going to control everything. And I hope that technology doesn't enter a lot in our privacy, that it's a problem that cities of the future may face.
So for Barcelona in 20 years, I think they will have more Fab Labs than regular houses. No, seriously, I think that there was a blog post on the World Economic Forum blog a couple of weeks ago where actually a Danish woman, but that's beside the point, Ida Auken, mentioned that her expectance of the future is that she will own nothing, everything will be automated, she will have absolutely no privacy, and life will be pretty good. And the no owning kind or statement, it doesn't have to do with communism. It's just the fact that everything is abundant and it's available the minute you want it. So it doesn't make any sense to try to own anything because it's much easier to just call it with your phone or your chip or however that works. And aside from the no privacy thing, then obviously the convenience of that will obviously be quite appealing. She also sort of envisions in that blog post the dark side of this, which is basically referring to her own life as being in a big city. There are people outside the cities, the marginalized people, either those who decided to not buy into the whole technological fascination that insists on living lives as far from technology as you can, or the ones that are sort of forced to be marginalized, the ones that are outside the wall, metaphorically speaking, and that could be outside a region or outside a continent or whatever. So obviously, this vision doesn't come automatically for everyone, and the inclusion bit is not automatic. I mean, we're very privileged, everyone in Europe and everyone in this room, and the people that can afford to be at this conference and discuss the future. But obviously, there's a lot of people who cannot be here and have absolutely no means of changing that reality. So, I mean, like everything, there's a duality to the future that we're heading towards.
I'm going to say like a little bit of a dystopian future, but actually it's not that crazy since we have Donald Trump as president. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. I had no part in that. I apologize.
So it's highly possible that in 20 years, Barcelona will be 30% flooded. So we're going to be going in gondolas like Benny style to some of our,
that
go
should
to
be
school.
pleasant. That'll be pleasant.
Yeah, that could
be
be
nice.
good. Then I would say that the 30% of the population that, lost their, or part of the population that lost their homes because of floods, they would have the option to move to Mars in a one-way ticket. And then we will be growing using cellular technologies our own food in our homes, probably. And I imagine that they won't be money, but actually a value exchange kind of system in which we're going to trade some kind of, not favors or anything, but we're going to see things flowing with a different currency that is not necessarily money.
And now the boring World Bank official has to talk about technology. Yeah.
The World Bank will be all powerful.
Yes. So I have no idea because I'm not a technologist. So I'm gonna say yes to everything you guys said. My only big concern here is, and it's not only Barcelona, it's in general, are we providing the skills needed for everybody to enjoy that? And I don't know if at the end we will not need jobs, but I guess we will, because even through the first industrial revolution, we thought we were not going to need jobs after going from agrarian to industrial, and then we evolved those jobs. And my guess is we'll have something similar. Even though we share everything, there will be some effort to do no matter what. So are we providing the skills that are needed for everybody to have equal opportunities, and especially the disadvantaged or the low-income population? And that's something that cities are very bad to manage in general. And you always have this have and have-nots. And I don't know if it's going to be rural versus urban. I think it's going to be within urban. And more you have the increase of cities. So my bet is rural areas are going to be luxury areas more than any other thing, or people that don't want to be part of the city. But it's going to be by choice. So how do we manage that equal opportunity? How do we provide the skills that are needed? And we think about that. Because so far we've done a very bad job, and particularly in Spain, about thinking what are the skills needed and the 21st century skills. We still think that education is something that someone goes and tell you what to do. And even this panel, why are we having a panel instead of having a different setting in doing this? We haven't evolved in that regard. So if we continue doing that, the people that have access to those opportunities will be able to, the others won't.
Okay, so we have literally one question. So, well, there's three here, but this is probably the best one. Disruptive thinking. What are the examples of cities who created a disruptive thing? What cities are using disruptive technologies? Just give me like one example that you really, really like.
So one example that I really like is not necessarily what you would call a disruptive technology, but nevertheless it's a technology that's used to disrupt. is the Dubai happiness meter, which basically works, as I've been told, I haven't tried it myself, but basically you have an app where you can sort of rate your happiness after you've had an exchange with a public official. So it doesn't ask you sort of specifically, if you're not happy, then why are you not happy? But it's trying to measure the happiness of the population. And I think coming from the country that is often sort of highlighted as the happiest country in the world, I don't see I don't see the scientific proof for how that is measured. But this is at least a way of trying to do that using the technology, and then using that data for we'll see how it's gonna work. I mean, Dubai has a lot of other serious issues, but nevertheless, it's a matter of trying to sort of quantify livability through technology.
Okay, David, let's go down the line. Besides your thing, what's cool?
I'll say my city, Sant Cugat, which is starting to use kind of blockchain for e-government and asking questions to the citizens to decide part of the budget of the city of the next year.
All right.
I would say the ambitious plan of Barcelona to have for the technological sovereignty, even if it sounds at something I don't want to remember, I'm Venezuelan, but it's that having the ownership of your own technology and have sovereignty about your technology, for me, is critical.
All right.
I think cities don't kind of use the disruptive technology themselves so much as take it from someone else and then decide. It's not that they are thinking, I'm going to use it. So I think it's how do you do things differently? How do you take something that was used for something else and you apply it differently? I think that's the big innovation of cities. For instance, what Medellin did with the cable car and transforming that into urban transportation was something nobody was thinking. Everybody was thinking about that going to ski, right? And now London has it, and now in Washington they're thinking of having it, and these things. So I think that's going to be the breakthrough of cities. And now I'm very interested in New York and what they are planning. It was a Danish architect and how they want to reuse infrastructure to avoid the flooding of New York and reuse it as a way that is social, also infrastructure, right? This kind of reusing, I think those are the innovations that are more disruptive.
Okay. Go down the line. Tell these people how they can contact you if they want to.
Right, so you can access me through my email, vmulas, V from Victor, Mulas, @worldbank.org.
Tomas at fab.city.
So I'm on Twitter, which is at my last name, Vilem. Otherwise, I would say I'm just one of many in the Danish Design Center, and I would like to highlight everything that happens there. So rather than my email, go to ddc.dk, choose English, and my email is there, but a lot of other really, really interesting people there as well.
All right.
You can contact me at david@charge.io.
And nobody wants to contact me, I assure you. So there we go. Thank you very much, guys. This has been really amazing. Thanks for visiting.